Hello again, everyone. John the Nerd with no job here, and it's time we talked about that third episode of The Last of Us. The first two episodes were jam-packed with story moments and fan service for fans of the game. Can the third keep up this momentum? Am I still just being negative, keeping a consistent worry about a video game adaptation? Well, let's take a look. The last two episodes have started with cold open, so let's see what they're going to use. Wait, that's Joel and Ellie. Holy f***! We start with Joel and Ellie in the woods outside Boston, having fled the city following Tess's explosive conclusion. Wait a second. Those look like the Rocky Mountains. Now, I had previously worried about Ramsey's portrayal of Ellie, and for brief moments here, we see the goofy dialogue mixed with some more concerning moments feel out of place if Joel is supposed to be, the adult, her protector. She talks to him more like an equal and less like he's the adult in this situation, the adult with the gun. Admittedly, we do get some useful information from this banter, like the scar on Joel's head, once more. Questions we have thought of been asking for years have been asked. Turns out someone shot at him and they missed. And then he missed them. Is this the show saying he has bad aim? Are they making a meta joke about this? When did this become Rick and Morty? As we continue their meandering journey to see Bill and Frank, we stop at what looks like a gas station, so Joel can get some supplies that he and a certain dead woman left here just in case this very thing happens. Well, of course he can't find it. Silly Joel. Oh my god, hey look, it's an arcade cabinet, and Ellie gets all excited. Do you get it? It's like that one scene in the video game. See, everyone, they know the video game! Now, being the super mature and experienced survivor that Ellie is, she wanders off to explore the back room of the gas station, and finds a hatch in the ground. Many questions could be asked here, but most importantly, an abandoned building. How does Joel not hear her clearing the rubble off the hatch? Or her opening it as it groans louder than most old people standing up? She doesn't naturally tell him because he's a boomer and clearly won't understand the wonders that such a hatch could hide. Alright, sarcasm aside, the scene feels a little off to me. Why do we need to see Ellie exploring a basement and then stabbing a random infected that she finds trapped under some rubble? She really takes her time with it, doesn't she? Doesn't bother to tell Joel, even after. And we know the scene's going to work out well because it's a TV show and, well, the character's supposed to be in the entire season. So any suspense of her getting injured here is kind of ruined. And we just get to see her cutting and stabbing an infected. It's a little gratuitous. Almost Walking Dead levels of gratuity. Violence for the sake of violence. We cut back to Joel, who has finally found the supplies. At last! I thought he'd gone senile in the amount of time it took him to find the darn things. Wait, now he's leaving the gun behind? Why? Oh, he doesn't have ammo. It makes sense. But also has an annoying bit of foreshadowing there, but I'll get to that a little later in the video. Our duo now, remember, Tess died, continues their journey towards Bill and Frank's wonderful compound. We see more of the consequences of the fall of civilization, like a crashed airplane, where Joel mentions the tedium of air travel. I mean, $12 for a bad sandwich, it sounds pretty cheap compared to now. Ellie naturally thinks this is ridiculous. He got to fly. God, this senile boomer! How could he not see it like that? He points out the other passengers, probably on that crashed airplane, got to, do the same thing. Fly. Until they didn't. Continuing to make banter as they travel, and I'm going to pause here to say for a moment, I do actually appreciate it. I make fun of it, but they're showing the first real moments between these two bonding as the main protagonists. And it does feel genuine, from the plain discussion to lessons about the failed government's work after the fall. Hang on. The government mishandling and bungling any attempts to stem a pandemic? Wait a s- We get an outright confirmation that the cordyceps was indeed in the food, and the show seems to take a casual shot at 28 days later, with a remark about monkey-borne viruses just being stupid. While this bond is good to see, I see worrying signs of Joel's passivity in the conversation. Ellie continues to lead and control the subjects of the talks, even when he really wants to avoid it, and she would too if she knew what the government did to innocent and healthy people when they couldn't house them. Now, Joel and Ellie finally arrive at Bill's town. They enter the town near the power station and begin to pick their way through Bill's outer defenses. Narrow alleyways and brick facade houses greet them. Unfortunately, despite his hyper-focus on making this place safe, infected have found places to hide in back rooms and in sheds. Worst of all, though, are the traps Bill himself has placed. These are used to devastating effect if an infected or an intruder trips them. Boom! Dead! Deader. It takes them some time to get anywhere near the church where Bill is said to live, and the situation is made far worse as their rather loud journey is attracting the attention of the infected, and it's brought to an absolute pinnacle of badness when Joel is strung up by one of Bill's traps and left hanging upside down. Ellie is forced to try and cut him free as the infected swarm them all at once. When he's finally cut free, a masked Bill finally shows up to help them. You'd think a guy with this many alarms would have noticed they were there sooner, but whatever. And we end up in a quiet bar after a tense chase where Bill confronts Joel and Ellie about, coming to his town. He's a dick. Bill and Joel argue about a car so they can go find Tommy, and Bill says the only car battery he can think of is on the other side of town, the side flooded with infected. Reluctantly, Bill agrees to help Joel and Ellie get a car going. Then he will never ever have to deal with them again. To be fair, he and Ellie don't really get along, and we follow them as they go through the streets to a church safe house where they arm themselves. Bill talks about looking out for only numero uno, and having anyone else around will just drag you down. Next up, our heroes make their way through the backyards of dilapidated houses, plants overgrowing and teeming with infected, from normal runners to dangerous clickers. But the trio are able to force their way to the high school, where a military truck has crashed, and the only battery they so desperately need is likely to be. When Bill cracks open the hood of the truck as the infected swarm, there's no battery. Someone else has taken it, and the infected are closing in even more. They're forced to flee through the school, and God, it looks like every high school ever. I hate it. Finally, they reach the gym, and they're brought face to face with a bloater, one of the largest and most dangerous infected in the world of The Last of Us. A tense battle ensues, and Joel and Bill are barely able to put the monster down. They continue their flight from the infected, and it seems like all of them have been told where our heroes are. I wonder if that Cordyceps network from the earlier episodes did that. But they're able to take shelter in a darkened house. However, new dark revelations await our heroes. A body is seen swinging by Joel and Bill is quick to confirm that he knows the dead man. Only his former partner, or as he seems to refer to him, his ball and chain, would wear a shirt like that. This is revealed to be Frank's home, where he gathered supplies to flee to the Boston QZ, and unfortunately during his last foray, he was bitten and decided suicide beat turning into a monster. At long last, luck appears to be on the side of our heroes, as it turns out it was Frank who took the battery. He also stocked up on supplies for his journey, which Joel eagerly takes. When he discovered his time was ending, Frank left a note for Bill. How caring. Oh, no, it's stating his hatred for the man. How glad he was never to spend another day with him. Good Lord. With no small amount of effort, the trio get the truck running, and before departing they stop at Bill's hideout so he can disembark and go back to his solitude. He and Joel exchange a pleasant goodbye before Bill tells him, in no uncertain terms, to leave and never come back. Oh, you were expecting me to talk about the TV show. Well, I subverted your expectations there, didn't I? Isn't that just the greatest narrative device ever? Truly, there is none more creative or original in storytelling than I. Give me my award now, please. Alright, cheap shot at a bad storytelling device done. Back to the episode. After learning about the government's treatment of, excess healthy people, we cut to 20 years in the past during the outbreak when Ron Swan... where Bill is waiting for the New World Order to get out of his house so he can live in peace and solitude. We get a montage of him preparing his new fortress so he can live out the rest of his days in peace. He takes his neighbor's boat, loads up on gas and building supplies from the Home Depot. See, Ron Swanson did know their job better. After he finished all his preparation with a fence around his new town, traps in place, and ways for him to live comfortably, Bill sits down for a gourmet dinner. And what would be dinner without entertainment? Bill is alerted to the presence of an infected walking near one of his traps that he happens to be monitoring with a trail cam. The silly infected walks straight into the tripwire and boom! Deader! Just like the game. We now smash cut to 4 years later, and Bill is at once more disturbed by alarms, but this time it's from one of the pits surrounding his fence. But it isn't infected. It's a man named Frank. This man is starving and only wants a bite so he can continue to make his way to Boston. Bill at first refuses, not wanting anyone to come into a safe zone, let alone if they might bring friends later. After some discussion, he relents and offers Frank a chance to shower, have a meal, but then he has to be on his way. Frank is taken aback by the nice home Bill has for himself, and I gotta ask here, did they steal my grandmother's furniture for this scene? That is her dining room table. Those are her chairs. Can we have those back, please? Anyway, surprises for Frank continue to come, as Bill not only cooks a gourmet meal of rabbit for Frank, but also pairs it with a wine. Absurd! He's a man. Men can't be refined. How ridiculous! We get some more bonding between the two, as Frank tries and fails to play a piano, leading to Bill taking over and singing quite well. And I'm left to wonder, is Bill tuning this piano? Because you gotta do that. This bonding is when the show hits us over the head with the fact that these two men are gay, in case you missed it. Now, while I like this story in a vacuum, there are parts of it that bother me, and as part of the story of Joel and Ellie, it doesn't do much, but I'll come back to that point a little later on. For now, the start feels very problematic to me. Not the cute bonding we see near the piano, but the immediate jump to Frank waiting for Bill in bed. If Frank were a woman, the implication of sexual favors for protection would be awful and sexist, but the show plays it off as a tender moment, and it's implied Frank just moves in with Bill right away. Now maybe the show takes a very Skyrim approach to relationships. This is a harsh world, we're all going to die, so let's not go at a healthy pace, despite the fact there are other houses in Bill's safe zone, so why not have Frank move in there first? But no. Let's just immediately start living in the same room with this guy I met, an hour ago. The story also takes big time jumps with Bill and Frank, as the next scene is several years later with Frank storming out of the house screaming profanity at Bill, because Bill doesn't see using paint or gas to maintain the safe zone as important. As the conversation goes on, Frank seems to be manipulating Bill to get what he wants, or it's implied Frank will leave him. Frank also takes this opportunity to spring on Bill that they are having guests coming, and while we later find out this is Tess and Joel, the show seems to imply that it's bad that Bill doesn't want people to know where he is. This is a world of lawlessness and murder, where there is no justice system to put people back in place. Why does this show want us to feel that distrust in this world is bad? As we see later, another group arrives at the safe zone. They don't come for a meal, they come to raid, and this, to me, screams of Frank's naivete. The show wants us to feel like Bill is the one who's in the wrong because he's, isolated and paranoid, but they literally get attacked a few scenes later, and what Frank suggests seems dangerous and immature to me. Also, when the raiders arrive, I have to ask, why is Bill standing in the middle of the road? Why is he not behind cover? There are fences, there are pots of plants. They can easily shoot him while he's standing there, and they do. And given this happens nearly a decade after the outbreak, how did they find the safe zone? Did Frank tell them with his radio conversations? Is Frank responsible for this? The final arc we get with the pair is a cut to the current time just before the first episode, and Frank has fallen very ill and is now wheelchair-bound, very reliant on Bill for help just getting out of bed. Again, the moments between the two are very sweet and the ending is quite tender, with the two deciding to leave this world together. My only complaint here is Frank becoming sick feels out of nowhere. People do get sick out of the blue and become deathly ill without warning, but from a storytelling perspective, a scene where they'd survive the raiders maybe the day after, then have Frank get a nosebleed or something, would have given it more weight to me than, wham, all of a sudden he's sick. Also, given how quickly he decides to go along with Frank's wishes, I have to ask, does Bill work for Health Canada? After all of this, we finally have Joel and Ellie reach Bill's compound. It's eerily quiet, and when they enter, they discover that Bill and Frank have passed. Bill has left his truck, how convenient, and all of his worldly possessions to Joel and Tess. During this scene, we finally see Joel start to act like his game counterpart, taking charge of the conversation, and setting ground rules about them leaving their histories out of it, and telling Ellie to keep her condition under wraps at all costs. Now one could say we got the old bait and switch from expecting to see Joel and Ellie's adventure, instead we got, a love story between two gay characters. I mean, it's not like the director said anything like, oh wait, he did. Does anyone nowadays really have a problem with a story between two gay characters anymore? From the wording of the interview I read, it seems more like the director thinks he's in the 90s, where introducing such storylines hadn't really been done before. Except he isn't. This is the 2020s, and we've seen many stories with the subject, and while on its own it's a good story, it isn't what we're here to watch, hence my subverting expectations joke earlier. He also talks about getting away from the bury the gays trope that TV has had, and that's the trope where one of them is always killed off very quickly. And while yes, it does that, instead it kills both of them, and it doesn't bury them, it leaves them rotting on the bed. Oh yeah, that's very romantic. It also feels like it cheapens the world of The Last of Us to me. In the games, humanity is on its last legs. The best parts of us are gone. Raiders, hunters, and more seek to victimize and terrorize anyone they can, And in the safe zones, Fedra runs a totalitarian regime that wants to turn people into worker drones who exist but don't ask questions. This all feels very Walking Dead to me. We get a brief interlude in the main story that they feel they absolutely had to tell us. Like they didn't have enough story to cover all the episodes they had been commissioned for, or they just didn't like the way the source material went. The last episode ended on Tessa's sacrifice, and we're expecting to pick up the threads of that instead to be rug pulled into a different story. If this was a spin-off show, Survivors of The Last of Us or something, I would not be bothered by this, where it's a collection of short stories of other survivors and side characters in the world, but this is the third episode. People are wary of video game adaptations, and rightfully so. We've had many terrible ones that make changes or outright ignore their source material. Now, all of this brings me to my final point. I think my Violent Joel theory that I posed in my earlier videos is wrong. The evidence in the show almost seems to be pointing to Joel as an idiot who makes the wrong choice. He leaves the AR behind despite getting ammo later on when he himself said he doesn't have the ammo for it. And the moments in Bill and Frank's flashback where the show seems to imply that being isolated and an unempathetic survivor is wrong. It's like the show is screaming that Joel cannot make the right choice when it comes down to it. And given what happens at the end of the game, I'm left to wonder if they're setting up Joel as a violent moron who seals his own fate. Time will tell. I hope I'm wrong. And I'm just seeing bad intentions where there are none. The history of video game adaptations and a lot of recent media does not give me the hope that I am wrong. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If my video was entertaining, please consider giving me a like and adding a subscription to my channel. I've been John, the nerd with no job, and I hope you have a great day.